If you have been to Pinehurst, you have likely run into Tom Stewart. He is the owner of the Old Sporting Gallery in the village of Pinehurst. He's a golfing legend, and he's got a ton of golf stories. That's all next in Paradise in the Pines. Welcome to Paradise in the Pines, a podcast about the people, places, and stories that make this the home of American golf. Brought to you by the Pinehurst Southern Pines Aberdeen Area Convention and Visitors Bureau. And welcome to Paradise in the Pines. Today we have Tom Stewart. He is the owner of the Old Sporting Gallery in the village of Pinehurst. Tom, it's been a while. We should have had you here long before now, but it's great to see you in the Pines.
Thanks, Phil. Appreciate it. I enjoyed our conversations at the coffee spot for a few months
Tom was
now.
referring to one of many coffee shops in downtown Southern Pines, Amor Ciego. It's a small little coffee shop right next to the Pilot newspaper, right there on Pennsylvania Avenue, but a really cool place. It's almost like a United Nations of employees there, because you've got people from South America, you've got people from Central America, Ukraine. I think there was somebody that was working there.
Asia.
But they've got a tremendous coffee and the pastries. I eat way too many of them, but it's a great place if you get a chance. And many more great coffee shops in downtown Southern Pines. There's got Swank, Masonette. You like Java Bean. Hang out there every once in a while. Man, it's great to have you here, Tom. I've heard so much about you. I got a chance to finally met you when I first moved here to Pinehurst almost 7 years ago. And I came into your shop, and I was just blown away because I love collectibles, memorabilia. It is just it's really a museum of collectibles. I mean, you could spend hours in there just look at everything you have. And I brought this in today because I did purchase this from you. This was an old putter boy from, I guess it was from the old North and South Trophy, because, I mean, it sits atop.
That one especially, yeah.
And I think I told you that day, I'll never win the North and South. I might compete in it, but I'll never win it. And I figured, okay, if I'm not going to win one, at least I can buy one and have the trophy.
And it goes back 1910.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a great piece of memorabilia collectible. Yeah.
In all your travels around the world playing over 50, 60 years, I mean, is this really kind of like one of the most unique, when you look at golf courses and their symbols and their things that represent their golf course or their legend, the putter boy has got to be one of the top in the world.
I think in the United States, it's the oldest. The UK might have some that are older, but no, the putter boy. But interestingly enough, I was in Covent Garden in London one time. I saw the exact same statue. This was before I knew any thought about coming to Pinehurst, and it had a cricket bat. So it started out 10, 15 years before the golf boy, it was a cricket lad. And so then, if I'd have been able to buy that, it would have really been something.
Yeah.
But so it started out over there and came here, and now it's been the mascot for 100 years.
As we record this, I was in your shop yesterday and ran into Chris Hill, a good friend of ours, mutual acquaintance. Chris is our account executive from Our State Magazine, one of the great publications in the state of North Carolina, the best for sure. And he's from Michigan, just like you. So talk about growing up in Michigan and how your life, I mean, I've had 4 careers. Like, you've had one in the game of golf, and that's been it. So how did you find at an early age, growing up in Michigan, that golf was where you wanted to be the rest of your life?
Well, it started out, I lived on a farm and 10 miles from town, and I hitchhiked when I was 10 years old, 10 miles to caddy at Petoskey Bayview Country Club. I had an older brother, 5 years older, who started caddying there. One day I had a game that I would throw a golf ball against steps, and it was a baseball game. And if it had gone over my head, it was a home run.
I played that same game. I had a little rubber ball, though, but it was like a tennis ball, but it had no fuzz on it.
Well, one day my mother was hanging wash out in the back, and that ball kept hitting her wash. And she said, "Why don't you go caddy with your older brother?" My thumb was on the road hitchhiking to that golf course as 10-year-old, and caddied there for, till I was 16. Then I became the waterman at Walloon Lake Country Club, and my two friends I played golf with every day were Tom and Ridge Watson. of golf fame, and Ridge was a vintner in Carmel, and then their dad hired me as a golf professional between my junior and senior year. I was all set to go to law school, but I found out you needed money to do that, right. And I didn't have it. So I took that golf professional job and never looked back.
And you've had a chance to, you played in college. I think you played basketball and golf in college.
I did.
And then you got a chance to travel the world. So talk about traveling back then and traveling the world versus today. Obviously, had to be a little bit more cumbersome.
Well, yeah, I graduated from Aquinas College, even though I came to North Carolina to try and play golf. But in those days, you didn't get your scholarship until a year later. And at that point, I had run out of money and went back and graduated from Aquinas. But while I was there, I played against a guy named Fred Muller, who was at Hope College. And we became best friends in college. And he had a job down in southern Michigan. I was a professional in northern Michigan. And we became best friends and found out you could plunk down some money and go play in Australia, New Zealand, and get in most of the tournaments. And so we did that as two young guys around 30 years old, and had so much fun, for about 6 months in Australia and New Zealand. Went to South Island of New Zealand to hike for about a month. Wow. And then came back to go to work. And then the next year we went to South America and played the South American Tour, which was fascinating and great fun. Tough to do today, but everything was taken care of. We had places to stay, and today there's so much money in the game. Back then, at our level, we both could play a little bit, and we'd come back with more money than we went with. We found out that if you took an extra set of ping clubs to those tours, first place you go to, they would give you $1,000 for a set of ping clubs that we might have paid $250 for, so that was our spending money. But there was nothing more fun than that, to do that. We were both single, and, to have a best friend like that I just lost 3 days ago. Fred Muller was the golf professional for 45 years at Crystal Downs in northern Michigan, ranked number 13
one of the great courses
world.
In the country, yeah.
Very hard to get to. He was the gatekeeper and the professional, but was one of the great men in golf, and a great loss. We had hoped to spend our waning years playing golf and drinking a Guinness here and there, and lost him too quickly.
I'm sad to hear that you lost your great friend. Talk about traveling back then. I mean, now you've got so much conveniences, but how were you able to do that? And then also, you talk about you were able to win some money. How much was won from like legitimate tournaments and then actually some bets on the side, maybe?
Well, there were always games. Fred and I played against John Cook and Billy Casper at Hiratonga Golf Club in New Zealand, and the caddies were on strike. Well, Fred and I, Titleist, had made us Sunday bags because we knew we were going to play other golf courses and carry our own clubs, so we didn't have a staff bag. So here's Billy Casper pulling a cart with his big staff bag. John Cook carried his McGregor staff bag, and we beat them probably out of $50 a piece. But when a win is a win,
$50
as they
is
say.
$50.
Yeah, and there was one point in that round where there was a rope bridge to get to a par 3 tee, and Billy starts walking across there, and I said, Billy, we're all going to end up in the river with you pulling that thing. Leave it here. It's a driver. It's a par 3, but it's the windiest place in one of the windiest places in the world. I said, you're going to hit everything you want. Well, let me see. I said, Billy, I'll carry your bag across. But, I mean, it was a lot of fun.
And those bags, those were the huge bags.
Huge bags. You could live out of them. Right. And when you were asking,
well, Rodney Dangerfield had the keg inside of his in Caddyshack.
He did, and one of the great lines in a movie. Yeah, no, but the travel was pretty sparse. I mean, we stayed in great hotels, and we always had. Part of the problem was if you had an afternoon tee time, the bus went to the golf course once, So you'd get there in the morning and you'd putt and you'd read books and you'd
Yeah.
do everything till your tea time came up. But it was simpler. And but every tournament overseas was on national television, so it was like
yeah.
every place you went was like a major tournament. And if you made the cut, you'd have the television on you for a while. And I remember the first time it happened to me at that same place I was talking about. I'd started out with a couple birdies and was on the leaderboard. Next thing you know, a guy said, "Hold up on that shot. We got to get you here." So I'm waiting for a TV camera to set up. It's amazing how much tighter my grip got. It was a different game, but that's how you learn.
Interesting. I guess one of the big things in the news in golf today is that it's taken too long. 5.5, 6 hour rounds for television is just not good. What's your take on that in terms of like speed of play, pace of play?
Well, at the club level, I ran Bay Valley Inn, was Jack's second golf course that he did with Desmond Muirhead. And we had a 250-room hotel, 200 members, and walk-ons at $75. And we were playing 180 to 200 people a day. And I made sure that the first people that went out were 3.5 hour players, and everybody had to keep up with them. I learned early on that I'd rather have 4 people mad at me because I would ask people to leave the golf course to make it palatable. No, back then, I'd rather have 4 people mad at me than 104, and it worked. We could play in 4 hours.
How do you get the PGA Tour players to do that, though?
The money is not important. I mean, you can fine them all you want. You have to penalize them.
Yeah.
That's got to be maybe 2 shots. And, I've watched one of these TYL or whatever's on TV.
TGL, yeah.
And Tiger got buzzed for taking too much time for a putt. And by the way, that's another issue that's
Right.
kind of controversial and interesting. It's about money, but I hated to think that it took me 77 years for me to find out what my launch angle was. That I'd played my whole life without knowing ball speed, club speed, everything else. So it's a different game. We played by feel, as most of the older guys did. Jack did. Everybody did. And today, when I see a guy standing up over a 3-foot putt and jocking his feet, and Crenshaw and I had a conversation a while back
About the aim point?
You'd have to have take a seat with you while these guys are doing that. But no, it's ruining the game.
Yeah, no question. And hopefully they'll figure out a way to get it done. You talked about traveling around the world. I think you said you played in 50 countries.
Well, I played in about 35 countries, but tournament-wise, about 25, 27.
Okay. My point being is that you got a chance to play in Russia, and really kind of a life-changing thing for a number of reasons. One, you met Alana, your wife there, but also you started an organization called Sports Promotes Friendship. Mm-hmm. Talk about that and your relationship with former President Mikhail Gorbachev.
Well, when I was at the Adios Club, Arnold Palmer's all-men's club in South Florida, Sven Tumba, who was a Swedish hockey player and kind of the godfather of Swedish golf, he said, "I've got a chance to build a golf course in Russia, and would you help me?" And I said, "I'm in." I was single.
When was that? In the 70s? Or?
It was 86, 87. So I went there and spent 2 months, taught 100 kids, met all the Olympic committee, and they had a little 9-hole golf course that was sodded by not the Swedes, maybe the Finnish people. Excuse me. And it was, when I went there, I had been on a plane. I didn't even have my own clubs, didn't make it there in time, so I was on national Russian TV playing golf on a 9-hole golf course blindly. And it was a cute 9-hole golf course. And, and ended up, shooting like 34. And I said, well, this is great. But then I had to give a golf lesson to some of the dignitaries and stuff. And, trying to get the ball in the air to a guy who's never played a ball and stick game, that's a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
So we eventually put down tennis balls, and they could move them, 10 yards or something. But, yeah, and then I brought the first 10 Soviet kids to the United States with Sven and lined them up to play all over Florida. They were here for a whole month. And I needed a translator. We were on the Today Show. The Reds are hitting the greens, and some of their Olympic Committee people were here. And it was fascinating. But we taught the first 10 kids, and then I went back to Russia and taught, hundreds of kids. But it was fascinating. And, the club ran successfully for 20 some years, and there was a feeder program it was right on Embassy Road, downtown Moscow, not the ones that Jones built outside and Jack and the rest. So we had a feeder program. Guys were learning the game, and just recently, 40-foot fence was put up, and it's become the haven for the oligarchs, and it's too bad because now there aren't that many kids coming.
Not really growing the game.
Yeah.
But there's still a prominent sport over there today?
No, never was. Oddly enough, a couple women have played on European tours and maybe one or two young men. But one of the kids that I brought over the first time, the youngest kid, Nazar Masou, he was 14. He got educated here, actually went to Aquinas, of course, the club or the college that I was at. He got his master's at the Thunderbird, and he now is the owner of a hedge fund, Orion Energy.
Really?
And so he's done very well.
Yeah.
So we got one real success story there, and one of the greatest guys you'll ever meet. So,
That's incredible. Great story.
Yeah.
In your other travels, you had a chance to play in India. And so interesting story there that how in the world did you get hooked up with Mother Teresa?
Well, that was interesting, and it was the beginning of my travels. I hadn't traveled much up till then, but I was always fascinated by India. I'd read Tagore, I'd read Gandhi, and was fascinated by that. And so when the oldest club outside the UK was Royal Calcutta Golf Club, the Brits had built it for their expats that kind of ran India as conquerors. And so I got invited and went there. And while I was there, I was brought up in Catholic school and was a hospice volunteer in Michigan before I went there. And I'd read a book by Malcolm Muggeridge on Mother Teresa. And having been an old altar boy, I showed up at her convent and said, can I help you? I'm a hospice volunteer in Michigan. And she said, yeah. So I spent a month there working in her home for the dying called Nirmal Hride. And so I spent a lot of time with her. She was a tiny little gal, but strong. And, it's easy to put these people on a pedestal, but even though she was a saint, she could tell off-color jokes. She could get angry if somebody was disrupting the feeding of a lot of people.
Do you remember one of those jokes?
No, but
not for air.
But it was fascinating that she was a real person, and I remember telling her, I said, you're going to be a saint here one of these days. She said, no, that's for old male priests. But no, and I actually got to drive a couple times with her. She said, can you drive? I said, all North Americans drive. I should have said no, but because driving in Calcutta, India is like being in a jar full of bees. You move, but you don't go anywhere. And the first thing she said is, don't hit one of these animals. You might hit a rickshaw driver and get away with it, but you're not going to get away with hitting a cow.
Sacred cow.
Yeah.
And she, doing the research for this podcast, she had told you a quote, which is very apropos to anybody today, is that it's not about the results, it's about the effort.
This was great for me, and because I'd been involved politically, at an early age, and of course grew up in the age of Vietnam, and was drafted, right at the end of my college career. And, I'd lost my first college roommate to friendly fire. But in any event, it was one of those things that I lost my train of thought.
We were talking about Mother Teresa and that.
Oh yeah,
res-
no,
not the results of the effort.
and the thing of it is, when you're working trying to end the war in Vietnam, personally, with not much chance, you put pressure on yourself to see change. And I asked her, I said, Mother Teresa, you're just denting the surface here. You're doing this great work, and it's commendable. She said, I'm more of a contemplative than a social worker. I do this out of my love for God. And lo and behold, she said, by the way, God is not concerned with your results, only your efforts. I mean, that was a weight that I probably had carried around for a while, so it made a huge difference. And then I started going to a monastery in Kentucky called Gethsemane, and wrote my first book while I was in there, or edited it, because it was mostly essays from old books and stuff. And that taught me another thing. You don't have anything to do for a month, the first time in your life. You don't have a deadline. Well, guess what? You get to know yourself a little better than you did. And it had a huge impact, and still does. Yeah.
You mentioned about being involved politically. You actually ran for Congress in Michigan.
I did.
During the era of President Reagan. So talk about what made you want to do that and what you learned from it.
Well, I worked for Bobby Kennedy when I was in college, and worked for him and was with him at a couple of visits, one to Michigan State and another one to Marquette University. And he was kind of a mentor of mine, as was Thomas Merton, the monk at Gethsemane. And it was social justice kind of thing, which the Catholic Church was very involved with at that time. And after being in the golf business, from 1972, this was 84. I picked the wrong year to run. I won the nomination, and it was the Upper Peninsula, all of it, and a third of the Lower Peninsula, biggest district east of the Mississippi. And, I spent 2 years doing it, and I loved it, just the interaction with people and ideas. The Upper Peninsula had like 25% unemployment. And I said, we have plenty of trees, but all of that stuff gets shipped to be processed somewhere else. Let's build some plants up here. And it was, another issue was Agent Orange. I mean, these guys were coming back from Vietnam, and they were dying of stuff that nobody had paid any attention to. So there were a lot of different issues, but like I said, Reagan won that district by double-digit points, and and I came relatively close. But some interesting things happened in that race. I'm passing out literature in Escanaba, Michigan, and a guy walks up and he looks at it and he goes, "Effing Democrat," and ripped it up in front of me. And I looked him back in the eye and I said, "I suppose a contribution's out of the question." That guy came back. A month later, I'm in a bowling alley passing out literature, and I see him and I go, "Oh boy." He walks up, hands me $100 check, and he said, "You didn't take it personally, so here's $100 and I'm going to vote for you." Well, then in the debate, my opponent's administrative aide is asking me the first question. And she said, "Mr. Stewart, you're 33 years old and never been married. And on camera," she said, don't you think that will hurt you in this district of family values?" I mean, she just gave me a limp wrist. And I said, "Well, ma'am, it might if my opponent had been married 4 times. I at least start with 4 votes." So.
That's great. That's awesome. You should run again. It'd be refreshing.
No, too old.
Speaking of old, you were 50 when you moved to Pinehurst in 1997. Yeah. What prompted the move to the Home American Golf?
I got married at 45. Our son turned 5, and I was still a professional in northern Michigan for 6 months in Adios, Arnold's all-men's club in South Florida, which was all Hall of Famers. And he needed to get in school, so I told Ilana, my wife, that we needed to settle down somewhere in between. Let's put up a map and throw a dart and see what we hit. Secret was I put up a Pinehurst map. So
There you go.
we've been here for almost 30 years. So, yeah.
Now, when you moved here, I mean, how did you establish the old Sporting Gallery?
Well, that's an interesting story because I had collected stuff, mostly books, in all my travels, and I had one of the best book collections you could have. And my wife had the nerve to want some of her things on the wall at home. So she said, why don't you get that stuff out of the garage? And I was walking downtown before I even moved here, and the Harvard building, where I am now, was for rent. So I rented that space for $500 a month.
I was going to say, not what it is today.
No, and so I started this thing, and it was successful because it was just before the 99 opened. And then during the course of that, the building came up for sale, and a partner of mine and I bought it, bought the building. It has 20 offices upstairs and 3 on the ground floor with an elevator. And so my buddy and I bought the building, and then he died, and we bought him out. And so we've been there almost 30 years now. So but I'm at the age where we're about to try and sell it. I might keep the store because I like going there and having a place to go. But I'm going to start spending summers in northern Michigan, where I'm from.
Yeah. Yeah, I play golf for over 50 years. I've never been to Michigan to play golf at all, and you'll tell me, and Chris Hill, our friend from our state, will say, I mean, you guys are from Michigan, that it's
best summers on earth.
Yeah,
best summers on earth. There's no humidity. I tell people, if you take the ferry from Mackinac City to Mackinac Island, it's the freshest air you'll see this side of top of Mount Everest.
Yeah. What makes Pinehurst so special for you?
The culture in golf in Pinehurst is real. It's authentic. A lot of people go to Myrtle Beach and stuff, and there's a lot of golf there, not necessarily good golf. And some of them may go for other reasons, especially if a group of guys, can find a place to go at night.
Right.
Where Pinehurst,
I think we know where we're going there.
And Pinehurst doesn't have that. And people come here. I always tell people here, your disposition's more important than your position, and your handicap is more important than your bank account.
Yeah.
And people come here, and if they try to be big shots or stand out, they don't last because nobody cares. People are here. It's a community in the best sense of the word. And I grew up in a small community in northern Michigan, and that's where I wanted to raise my son. So and it's lived up to everything. I've loved every minute we've been here, and you bet.
You mentioned the king, Mr. Palmer, a couple times. You've got a close relationship or had a close relationship with him. Talk about your relationship as it pertains to the Pinehurst area, because you told me a story before we rolled some film on this podcast that you guys were close to buying Mid-South.
Well, I wasn't part of the buying group, but Arnie hired me at Adios. It was an all-men's, 200 members, no pickleball, no pool, just golf, breakfast, and lunch, all caddies, all walking, never more than 3 hours. And so Arnie, became like a mentor and a godfather to me. Took my son out on his 16th birthday, but then when Plantation became Mid-South, the people that bought it, Pross Mellon and Ainsley and Bill Perry, hired me to come in there and redo it. And it was interesting. The Plantation, speaking of DEI, Plantation had to go, and they said, whoever can name this, rename it, gets $100. Well, I had a store full of signs that were travel brochures, and it always, every one of them said, no consumptives allowed in the Mid-South Resort. So I threw in Mid-South Resort, and that's what won, and that's why it's Mid-South. But the next day I went to the membership, and I said, ladies and gentlemen, we have a new name. We're now going to be the Mid-South Resort. And they said, who in the hell ever came up with that name? That's ridiculous. I said, I don't know.
That's
It's
awesome.
still Mid-South. And yeah, and Arnie was real important. Like I said, he took my son out on his 16th birthday, and he was the most authentic celebrity that ever. And Arnie still played when he would shoot 80. He'd still show up and play.
Yeah.
Now you don't see Jack out there shooting 80 or Norman or any of those other guys. He was as authentic, and he and his dad used to come to play here, even when Arnie was in college and before college, and they used to stay in those, whatever we call them now, down by the third green at Pine Needles, or Mid Pines,
yeah.
And so they had an affinity for here, and Deacon was, PGA professional and greenskeeper at Latrobe. So, but Arnie was the best. I had so much respect for him.
You mentioned Mid Pines, and we were talking before about golf courses in the Pinehurst area, and Mid Pines personally my favorite. I mean, I can play any number of courses here, but I mean, there's just something about that place. I mean, obviously, as Donald Ross and Kelly Miller, obviously being the president, owns 3 Donald Ross golf courses,
Right.
and Southern Pines. Kyle France has done a great job renovating all 3 of those. But what makes Mid Pines your favorite?
Well, I call it a mini Augusta. It goes right, it goes left, it goes up, it goes down. Greens are tricky. You short side yourself there. It's a tough play, a little bit like number 2. And it's just interesting. You hit every club in the bag, and at my age, it's a little easier getting around there than number 2. And now I turn 78 next week. I'm now playing blades and persimmons from the green tees and having as much fun as I did as a kid.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Talk about the growth of Pinehurst. I mean, in recent year, well, you were here for the first U.S. Open in '99, and now we have them through long after both of us will be gone in 2047. USGA moves their second headquarters here. We're U.S. Open anchor site. World Golf Hall of Fame is here. So when you see all that, and we are a globally recognized golf destination, what does that mean to you, having been here since 1997?
Well, having been steeped in golf my whole life, that's the reason I came here, was golf, and to be able to find a business that I could run and keep me interested, and being able to play all the Pinehurst courses. I've been a member there for a long time, and get to play Pine Needles and Mid Pines. I can't imagine a place that's easier to come to and be part of. Like I say, I have run, when I moved here, Henry Duncan, who was the chaplain of the chapel and had been the chaplain of the Navy, invited me to come speak to the Pinehurst Men's Fellowship, and it had been going since 1947. And I came and spoke, and afterwards he said, why don't you take this over? I said, Henry, I don't know anybody here. He said, that's why you should do it. And he was right. So for 27 years, I've still run the Pinehurst Men's Fellowship. And we met in the Pinehurst Men's members group for a long time. And then during COVID, we couldn't. And so we're now at the Pinecrest. And every second Wednesday of the month, we have a gathering. We had 65 people there the other day to listen to a speaker, and we've had the guy that designed the F-16, the first PhD at NASA, and Crenshaw, Longer.
Wow.
A lot of important people when they come through town, I find out, and they'll come and speak to us. So. Everybody said, how long should we talk? I said, you can talk as long as you want, but we're leaving in 20 minutes.
And if you get a chance to go to the old Sporting Gallery, I think about this because when I walk through, and I'm sure you've been through the new World Golf Hall of Fame, and you see some of the memorabilia in these lockers from everybody who's been inducted there over the years. I mean, there's some stuff in your gallery. Have you thought about contributing some of these artifacts to the World Golf Hall of Fame?
Some of the spaces were pretty sparse, including Tufts. And so Audrey Moriarty, who's run the library and the archives for forever, and her husband's one of my best friends, had some things that I could contribute, and it's people have come up with stuff. But, when the Hall of Fame was here, there was a lot of stuff here, and a lot of it disappeared, and But no, it's the Hall of Fame here is going to be a big attraction.
No doubt about
over
it.
the years. So.
Let's go off the grid just a little bit for a moment. I know as we record this in February, during the football season, being from Michigan, I would see you at a Murciélago. You're very proudly wearing a Detroit Lions hat. And I know Chris Hill, and we've mentioned him a couple times in this podcast. I said I was going to mention the Detroit Lions because he has lived and died, mostly died with
60
the
years. We needed a backup team. Nobody
this
wore.
was the year.
Nobody wore Lion stuff for 60
Yeah.
years, but with and I've always rooted for Michigan in football and Michigan State in basketball because I've known Tom Izzo, and so Michigan State basketball with Magic and all those guys, it was easy to root for, but. When Michigan won 3 in a row against Ohio State, and then again this year, beating them when obviously they shouldn't have.
Right.
But now that we've beaten them and they won the national championship, shouldn't we still be the national champs?
Yeah,
I mean, just by virtue.
I asked Chris that. I said, "What's more important, being Ohio State or winning the national championship?" And I think it's probably the former. You got to beat the team from the South.
Yeah. And Michigan State, if you're a Michigan fan.
Right.
Yeah, no, it's pretty territorial.
Well, I got to tell you, Tom, this has been an awesome conversation. I mean, we could go on for hours. I mean, the stories that you have, we have not even cracked the surface of the life that you've enjoyed, traveling the world, playing the game of golf that we all love. We appreciate all your contributions.
Thank you.
I'm sorry about your friend that had passed away, Fred Muller. I know it's a tough loss, but I'm sure he's going to be watching you play your rounds of golf.
Well, we told him we were hiking the Milford Track in New Zealand, and we were top of McKinnon Pass, and it was windy, and we were on a narrow ridge, and he started talking about what happens, when we go. I said, Fred, if you get there before I do, just save me a spot on whatever first tee you're at. So.
There you go. Well, it's a great way to leave this conversation. Tom, as always, I'll see you at a
Phil.
Murciélago or
Appreciate
any other
it.
coffee shop
Sure.
throughout the Sand Hills. It's always great to see you. Say hi to Alana, and I hope that we can tee it up sometime.
No, I look forward to it. Thank you.
Tom Stewart, if you haven't been to the Old Sporting Gallery, you've got to go. It's in the Village of Pinehurst, Old Sporting Gallery. You'll find something you like. I found this putter boy back in the day, and I love it. It's a cherished possession I have, and I get asked about it all the time. And I always say, I didn't win it, I bought it. So, you got to get it.
Still looks good on your shelf.
It looks
you know.
amazing. So thanks again, Tom. If you
Thanks,
want to learn,
Phil.
yes, sir. If you want to learn more about tourism, go to our website, which is homeofgolf.com. Want to watch our videos? Go to our YouTube channel, which is Home of American Golf. This has been Paradise in the Pines, and for Tom Stewart, I'm Phil Worst. We'll see you next time.
Thanks. Thanks. It's life is full of stuff. The world is way too serious. My job is to inject just a little bit of lightness.
That's funny.
Yeah.